Welcome to another episode of Question It, where a question is posed and we share our perspectives. I'm Kevin Strauss, the host of Question It and founder of Uchi, a simple social app built around one belief, that everything feels possible when you know someone has your back every day. Today's guest is Florence Koenderink. Hey, Florence, how's it going? Can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, Kevin. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Florence Koenderink. I'm Dutch and based in Belgium, so quite far from you. And I launched last year the Beyond the Trauma Wall, which was how we kind of connected, which is about trying to help people understand the root causes of a lot of the problems we're seeing, and the fact that actually there are practical things we can do to make really, really significant changes. And it's lovely to be here. I've enjoyed using the Uchi app, so I'm looking forward to this conversation as well.
Yeah, and this is very Uchi style. And I'm so glad we did connect. You reached out to me on LinkedIn, pretty randomly. I don't remember what post it was, but we connected, and I love the work that you're doing. It resonates so deeply with me, and it's just been so fun, getting to know you. And we've really, you're like a power user for Uchi, so I love that. It's been a lot of fun, Okay, so today's question is, tell me about a time when something didn't go the way you wanted, but you're glad it happened. Before we begin, this episode includes discussion of sensitive topics, including suicide, mental health struggles, and emotional pain. Please take care while listening. If support is needed, call or text 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline in the US and Canada, or text HOME or HOLA to 741-741 to connect with a live crisis counselor. For emergencies, call 911 or your local emergency services. Okay.
So, I had to think for a while because there's been a lot, and I have no regrets in my life. So ultimately, I'm glad with everything that happened, even if it was tough, because I've always found I've learned from it. But the one that I landed on is a bit over 20 years ago. At the time I worked as a nanny, and one job finished, and it took a while to find another job. And that was I was living in Ireland at the time, and that was with a family who had a 3-year-old girl who was still in treatment for cancer, and it was a very difficult situation. They did not know if she would survive, and there was a 9-month-old baby, and they were looking for someone to particularly be with the baby. The mother and father were both at home, but the older girl needed round-the-clock full supervision and support, having someone around her at all times. So they had to have someone with the baby as well. And they were quarantined in that house because the girl who had cancer had no immune system to speak of because of the treatment she was undergoing. So any cold would kill her. So it was a difficult setup to start with, but I kind of was willing to take on the challenge. It turned out to be a lot bigger challenge than I thought it would be, because I had an interview with the mother outside of the home because she didn't want to complicate things for the kids until things were clear. And that seemed okay to me. It seemed like a lot because they kind of wanted around the clock care, just one day off a week. And other than that, I would end up working, they were saying 24 hours a day, but I ended up not doing the night shifts, but I was on call at all times, and I lived in the family, so I was in quarantine with them. And yeah, that's a very it's a hot house to be in a situation that was obviously psychologically incredibly difficult for the parents. And in hindsight, I recognize that the mother was not coping psychologically, which is very understandable under those circumstances, and that probably in some way in her head, she was looking forward to the relief that my help would bring, but she was probably mixing up the practical relief that I could bring by taking over tasks with the psychological relief that no one could give her because of the situation being what it was. So the first few days I just, did the work, and it was a lot, but, it was okay. But then after a few days, or kind of around a week point, the mother started to turn against me. She was finding fault with everything I did. She gave very confusing messages. Whenever I did anything, it was wrong, even though it was for the safety of the baby or whatever. It was just not what had been asked, and it was not fast enough, and it was. So in the end, that really broke me down. It was amazing how I felt torn down by what happened. And so at the end of a week of abuse, essentially, with no real escape, I announced we had agreed on a 2-week trial period. And I announced that I would not continue because I couldn't. I told them that I would stay with them until they found a replacement, because they needed someone. They couldn't cope on their own, just even practically. But I wasn't going to stay on. And at that point, the mother really turned on me. Initially, she tried everything she could to persuade me to stay, offering me more money, offering me all kinds of things. So initially, she tried to rescue it. And then when I was like, I just cannot do this. And I wasn't accusing them of anything. I was just like, clearly, I'm not able to do this. I'm willing to take the blame for all of it. I'm not strong enough to handle this, but I can't do it. I can't continue. And then the mother had to go away for a day because there was a family emergency of the outside family. And that was a lovely quiet day when it was just the 2 kids and the father and myself in the house. But then when she came back the next day, I had my day off, my 1 day off a week. And I left the house and I broke down. I spent the whole day just complete crying and not knowing how I was going to make it through however long. I mean, how long is it going to take to find someone else? You don't know. It could be weeks. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to survive it. But at the time, I still had a lot of my unprocessed trauma, which was all about my job is to make things okay for other people. It's not about my needs. So I didn't see an out. It was just, I would have to stick it because they needed someone, and, it would have to be me. And at the end of that day, I came back, and the mother immediately confronted me, and she said she'd been thinking about it. And I put a pressure and a stress on the family that they really didn't need. So she wanted me gone now. And to be honest, that was an incredible relief. I was like, yep, you give me my bags, I will pack my bags and I will be out of here. But it happened to be St. Patrick's Day in Ireland on a Sunday. So I packed my bags and I left within a couple of hours. And I was standing outside waiting for a taxi because I was just pushed out of the door, essentially. And the mother had said, could I please be discreet, because she didn't want to upset the children. And I was like, obviously, I'm not going to do anything to upset the children. But when I had packed, and as I was carrying my bags down the stairs, the mother stood in the corner of the staircase with the baby on her hip, shouting abuse at me. So I was just really happy to be out of there. But as I said, it was St. Patrick's Day, so I ordered a taxi and I drove around with that taxi for 45 minutes trying to find a place where I could spend the night, because any B&B or hotel was either closed or fully booked. But despite all of that, I was just happy to be out of there. And what's interesting as well about that experience, that was a potentially traumatic experience. And I didn't really know anything about trauma or how to deal with it, but somehow instinctually and connected to an experience I had had previously, about 6 years before then, when I had tried to suppress a difficult experience and then ended up for a year, every time I heard a certain song on the radio, it kind of gripping my throat again. Now I was like, okay, I don't want to go through that. So I allowed myself to go through the waves of panic attacks that I had after that for a few days. Every time it came up, my first instinct was to push it down, but I was like, no. Go through it. And that actually prevented me from developing a trauma, because I had the traumatic stress, but I didn't store the trauma. But I did, after that, I'd been nannying for a while. I wasn't sure if I could actually go back into a family, realizing that it could do that much damage. I did in the end. It took me a few months to make the decision to try again and then to find another placement. And that was lovely. I had a great time working with another family. But yeah, that was quite an experience, but I learned a lot from that. Also to protect myself more particularly.
Wow. I mean, that is so intense, and
Mhm.
that is traumatic. I mean, and being responsible for really the family, and not just caring for the child with cancer, but really the mom. I mean, no one was going to be able to fill that job.
No,
Like, it just,
no.
nothing was ever going to be right, for her. Wow.
And
And
very understandably, but still it has a huge impact on whoever is, bearing the brunt of it.
yeah, I mean, and thankfully you were able to somehow, deal with that traumatic experience, so it
It
didn't,
broke me
like.
down. It took me a while to get my self-confidence, because I knew that what I got hurled at me was not true, but still
Mhm.
it undermined my self-confidence.
Yeah, just receiving, even for a week's time, receiving that kind of onslaught, but knowing in your core, like, no, that's not true, that's not accurate, and still being able to hold on to your own truth, so you
But
can get
only
through it.
partially. I mean,
But
it
partially,
was my own truth was still in there somewhere, but I couldn't really reach it for quite a while.
wow. Yeah, it gets all mixed up.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow. And what was the next? I mean, how did you decide to go back into it? Like, what helped you make that decision to try that job again? With a
Chance
different family.
mostly, as most of the decisions in my life have been. I was helping out a friend who I had helped with her kids for a long time, and they had to go away for the weekend or something. So I happened to be in a place in Holland where I read the newspaper that was there in the morning, and I saw an ad for asking for a nanny in Denmark. And I was intrigued by it and scared by it because of the experience that I'd had. But the experience was in March, and that was August, I think. So I'd really taken a few months out.
Mhm.
And I decided to at least go for the interview and to see. I wasn't at all sure that I would want to do it. But I went for the interview, and I went to meet the family in Denmark, and it felt okay to me. So I decided to chance it, and I really enjoyed working for that family.
Wow. Yeah. So you're drawn to caring for the children. I mean, so much of your work your career has been caring for children. Where do you think that's coming from?
Oh, that's not a mystery at all. I've always kind of known that I would have my own children from very early on. I've wanted my own children. It's not
Mm.
happened, but I've the whole starting with babysitting and then nannying and then working in institutions and things like that. All of that was kind of taking care of other people's children until my
Mhm.
own would come, except that they didn't, and that also took a while to process, but I've
Yeah,
got
yeah, come to grips with that reality. I mean, it's interesting because, well, I find it interesting anyway, because you said you've always wanted children and you've cared for children. I don't have that strong pull. I thought, years ago when I was in a relationship, I thought like we were talking about having kids and I was all into it and this is going to be amazing. Um, but that relationship didn't work out and I don't have kids, but I've never really felt that strong pull to have kids except when I was in that relationship with that woman. So where does that come from?
I mean, I feel that that's pretty much ingrained in me. That it was not just, I would like children, it was part of my identity. I knew I would have children. I just also, because I had so much experience in childcare, I was not going to do it on my own. And a relationship didn't come around soon enough for my fertile years to still be there,
Right,
um,
right.
to actually make that possible.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like where the instinct comes from, or you said ingrained.
I
Um,
mean, I'm also a writer. Where does that come from?
yeah,
That's
yeah,
also at my core.
yeah. But I do feel like I have a core of um helping people, but not in that direct sense. Like literally you're helping, as a nanny, you're literally caring in the space with people or, with the orphanages and things like that. My caring for people is definitely in a different way and it's a removed way. Like I'm not like a clinician of any kind, so I'm not
Yeah.
doing that. Um, and where does that come from? Like I don't know. I don't have an answer. But I'm just like it's just so interesting to me that you're a person and you do have that longing to care for children, raise children. I don't, but I do have a longing to help people live easier, happier lives or help people
Mhm.
experience less pain in their life, which is really how we connected and the pain we're talking about typically like emotional trauma, pain.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so it's just I don't know. I just that's probably another reason why we connect, like we're caring for people, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and going back, a while to pull out that story. That was
So what's your
great.
story?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so tell me about a time when something didn't go the way you wanted, but you're glad it happened. Um, and it's really interesting because the story that comes to mind does have to do with caring for people. And this goes back like 30 years. Um, so I'd been working for a couple of years as a biomedical engineer, out of school. Um, and it was fine, but I was in corporate America and I was just very disheartened. I was like, this is it. I've gone to school like, uh, you know, K through 12, college, grad school. Um, I worked all this time, my whole life in school to get a job. I get a job, a great job in corporate America, like my ideal job, which was designing total hip replacements, and some knee stuff, but really it was hips. And I was like, this is it? Like, this is, and the people, it seemed like no one really wanted to work. Like no one really wanted to take responsibility for anything. Like no one would step up to lead a project, or if something wasn't going well, they wouldn't be like, yeah, I screwed up, I'm sorry. Like no one would ever admit that. And I was like, there's got to be more, than this for my career. So it was about 3 years into my career, and I'm like, I need more. So I decided to apply to medical school, and I had to get prerequisites because I didn't have all of the, core classes. So I had to go back to school. So then I'm working full time and going to school, taking like, organic chemistry with labs and all that kind of stuff. And then studying for the MCATs and everything. And I was all in, I was working, I was volunteering at the local hospital, 4 hours a week, every Sunday night, I'm volunteering at the hospital. I was all in. I was 100% ready to dedicate my life to medicine, where everything else comes second. And, I've always loved medicine, biomedical engineering, all that was cool. And I thought, I've got a master's in biomedical engineering, I've got work experience. Yeah, my MCATs were like just minimum, like they weren't amazing. They were just like the bare minimum to like not be completely rejected. And while my undergraduate GPA not so great, my grad GPA was. But again, I had the experience, and a decent degree, and I'd done some good work, and I had money, so I could apply to a lot of schools. So I did. I applied to like 20 schools, like $100 a application fee or whatever. Like I applied to a lot, and I wasn't applying to like the best schools. I was applying to like not the best schools, even one or two like in the Caribbean, like whatever. And I didn't even get a single interview.
Oh,
Devastating. So I'm like, okay, do it again, take the MCATs again, more volunteering, all that stuff, do the whole round again. And then this time I applied to a bunch of medical schools, but then a bunch of DO schools, like Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. And I really liked their more holistic view. I thought that would really work well for me. And again, I'm like 27 or 28 years old, something like that. And again, I'm not applying to like the great schools. I wasn't applying to like Harvard. Not a single interview. And I was devastated. I was like, what am I going to do for my life? And I've been working toward this full time for like 3 years. I mean, like every waking moment, I was either at work or studying, totally. And I was also like training for my first marathon, because, I had to do it all, right? And that didn't work out at all. Like I did a long run and then I hurt my foot, and that was off the table. But I literally was lost. I'm like, what am I going to do with my life? I have no idea. And then I talked to a medical school admissions person, and basically the person said, yeah, you've got a decent background, but you just don't have the grades, you don't have the scores, you're not going to get anywhere through this process. And I'm like, yeah, but if you're just accepting students based on their test scores and their grades, you're not going to get the best doctors. And this person said to me, yeah, well, we do good enough.
That's a weird system.
and I'm like, that's the system, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so you don't really care about getting really good doctors. You just want it to look good on paper with test scores and grades. Because
Yeah.
we all know doctors that are terrible, quote, bedside manner, you
Hmm.
know? So that did not work out at all. I abandoned that completely. It took a while to reconcile that. At least a year of like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, with my life and everything. Um, and then in 1998, so that was from like 94, 5, 6, 7, that time frame. In 98, I went on a Knowles backpacking course, and I've talked about this before, but the Knowles is the National Outdoor Leadership School. And I went on this backpacking course for like 3 weeks, and that just changed my life. And then I got into all the backpacking and outdoorsy stuff, which then morphed into triathlon, and then it was a few years after that that I came up with the whole Uchi concept while I was backpacking in Alaska. And so still helping people, but in a different way, not in that direct clinical way of medical school and becoming a physician. Um, I'm so glad, knowing what I know now, I am so happy I never got into medical school. I mean, what a blessing in disguise that was. But at the time, I was completely devastated. But it
Yeah.
turned out, oh my gosh, so much better. So that's my story.
That's an amazing story. And did you have any idea of what kind of specialty you were looking for, or you just wanted to start and then see?
Yeah, actually, I was definitely thinking about like emergency medicine,
Mhm.
the whole like you never know what you're gonna get. Um, on any given moment, somebody
Mm.
walks in, and they could be dead already, like coming in, or you just never know what you're going to get. And I liked that variety. If it wasn't going to be that, then it was probably going to be something like neurosurgery or, some, brain thing or so. I don't know. So those were the two that I had thought about. Wow, I hadn't even thought about that in 30 years. So good question. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No, it's a big experience, and it is a big disappointment when you've worked that hard for that long to, yeah,
it
feeling that
really
that's the way
was.
you're going to turn your life around, and then suddenly it's just gone. And for
Yeah,
such an unnecessary reason in a way. It's not even that you kind of didn't make the grade, or it's just that it didn't fit the profile.
definitely, definitely. But I learned a lot from even that one conversation with that admissions
Hmm.
officer, that they don't really care,
Yeah.
like, and I honestly don't think a lot has changed. I'll probably get a lot of flack for that, from viewers or something, but that's what I believe. And I've worked, oh my gosh, so I've worked with surgeons from around the world for like most all of my career, and I'd say at least 90% would not choose the profession again.
Right. Yeah.
you
That's
know
pretty grueling.
yeah, I mean, and they love their job, they love what they're doing, but if they had to do it all over, they would
Yeah.
not make that same choice, like 90%. Yeah.
Yeah. But I
So
imagine that you also learned a lot from all of the work and volunteering you did to get the experience to be able to get in. That's also, you might not have gotten the opportunity or the motivation to do those things otherwise.
wow, yes, you're nailing it now. So now you're like interviewing me, I guess, which is all part of the conversation, which is great. But yeah, I can remember one time being in the hospital volunteering, and there was a guy there with a kidney stone, which is incredibly painful, apparent, like I've never had one, but and And I don't, patients are always chilly. Staff are always hot, but patients are always like cold. And they had like a warming oven for blankets, and that was kind of my big thing because it always made people feel better. So I'd always get them warm blankets, and I brought him a warm blanket, and he really liked it. And he had no family or friends, or no one was visiting him, and he was in like excruciating pain. And I could sit with him for like a couple of hours. We weren't always talking, but being there with him,
Holding space,
just being with him made a world of difference for him. And yeah, that really, it kind of chokes me up. Just, it really mattered to him,
Oh, it's a big thing to offer someone.
Yeah. And where in contrast, there was another time somebody came in, it was a hot summer day, and they were at a picnic and playing volleyball, and they were taking like salt tablets, but they weren't hydrating enough, so their electrolytes got completely out of whack. So this guy comes in completely unconscious, and not breathing, and I literally got to use the ambu bag and breathe for him. And oh, by the way, the ER nurse was giving CPR completely incorrectly. I mean, she was basically giving CPR on his stomach, not on his chest. Like, she was doing it completely wrong as an ER nurse. But anyway, but it was really cool. So, sitting with a man and how helpful that was, breathing for a man, and helping keep him alive as well. I mean, that's kind of the spectrum in the ER, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really cool. But what's also really cool about that was they did like a chem panel, see what is, they gosh, they totally know their stuff. And they saw his electrolytes were completely out of whack. And as soon as the doctor saw the number, he's like, oh, give him, I think it was like sodium bicarbonate or whatever it was. And his heart rhythm was like this. And within like seconds of getting the exact right chemical, his heart rhythm went like right back to normal. Wow, that is cool. So there was a lot of cool stuff, but just, holding. I'm going on and on now, but there was someone who'd come in. They came in because they had attempted suicide, and they put the person in the room, the mental room. That would make you want to kill yourself. I mean, the room was dimly lit, all dark gray. All the walls were dark gray. The floor, everything was dark gray. It was very dimly lit, and like nothing in the room, because they don't want something to hurt themselves with. And I mean, maybe there was something to sit on in some way, but that was it. And I'm like, and then they had to wait for hours and hours and hours and hours all by themselves until like the psychiatrist on call could come. I mean, that's just torture. Yeah. Have you ever seen stuff? I mean, because with the trauma that have you ever seen things, or?
I mean, in itself, that kind of isolation when someone is at a point of that level of desperation of, thinking of or trying suicide, what they need more than anything is connection and being seen. And, this makes you feel like you've been put out with the trash. And completely. It's a kind of confirmation that, you don't matter and that the world doesn't want you. Which, yeah, It's scary to think of what that would do to someone in that situation.
You know, I'm actually going to make a note to call the hospital. I might even go visit and just see what
if that's still the case.
What do they have now? Because that was 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. Do you know of any, like, how is it treated now?
I don't know what the protocols are in the hospitals right now.
I need to visit. Like, what's the psych unit like? Because that's just, if it's still anything like that, that is
scary.
That's really scary. I mean, that's like torture. That's not like torture. That is torture. That's more, so much more trauma for a person. Yeah. That just cannot happen. Yeah, I could probably call and ask a nurse to describe a room. But, you know, again, I don't even know how I'm gonna have to word that so that they don't feel like I'm, you know, some policing system or something. I'm gonna like sue them or something.
Yeah. Well, the problem is that the system is completely underfunded, and that the approaches are, I mean, that's why I started Beyond the Trauma Wall, that it's all about symptom and behavior management and not about looking at root causes.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can't blame the staff because the system doesn't allow it to do anything else.
Right. But the system is created by people. So they are.
That's why I started the Beyond the Trauma Wall initiative, to try and get people who are interested in seeing different systems to understand how that works and how it can be changed in ways that are actually even financially beneficial for the system itself.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about that? I mean, because I went to the subject of suicide, so now I'm going to have to put some kind of trigger warning at the front of this episode, which is fine. But since that we happen to go there,
give a suicide number.
Okay, I'll do that.
Suicide number in the notes.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. And again, the trigger warning. But can you expand a little bit more then on Beyond the Trauma Wall and your book and the overall goal? Just because we're there now in this conversation, so I would love for you to share. It just seems appropriate.
Well, it kind of comes out of everything I've done in a different ways, personal and professional. And I started a few years ago to recognize that a lot of the problems that we're seeing, whether it's aggression, intolerance towards anything that's other, pushback against proposals for social change, the need to be in control of everything and everyone all the time, the impulse to hit first, ask questions later, all of those are essentially trauma reactions. So they are part of protective coping mechanisms which were developed to survive traumatic experiences. And that's something which, if those traumatic experiences, like I explained with my experience in Ireland, I worked through it. You get, after an experience like that, you get traumatic stress. But if you are able to deal with your own emotions, and particularly it helps if you have a safe environment and people around you who are able, as you said, to hold space, to just be there with you while you sit through it. They can't make it better for you, but they can make you feel that you're not alone, as opposed to people who are put in isolation.
Right, not alone, and having some kind of support. And again, even just side by side sitting support.
Exactly. The holding space is the most important thing, and the feeling that you're not being judged for whatever you did or for whatever you say, that you're not going to be rejected, that it doesn't threaten connection, to be who you are and to feel what you feel. That's what helps you process trauma that finds the safety. If you can do that immediately after the experience, then you process and integrate. If that is not possible, then trauma gets stored, and your body and your brain start to prepare for something similar happening in the future, because experience has proven that this can happen and that this is a danger and that you need to protect yourself. So if you're not aware, if you haven't processed these things and you're not aware of the coping mechanisms that you have, they are activated subconsciously. So it's not that I decide to punch you. It's just that my brain goes, if I don't punch now, I'll be dead.
Right.
And then after I've punched you, I will go, why did I do that? I literally
because you don't know consciously, because it's all in your subconscious.
Exactly. So when we get triggered, when our unconscious coping mechanisms get triggered, which get lodged in our brain and in our body because we need to protect ourselves, and because that hasn't been processed, it hasn't been given a meaning and a space, and it hasn't been felt, then we get taken over by these coping mechanisms. And these coping mechanisms, they determine our immediate reaction. So why I would punch or start screaming or whatever, because something happens which my brain connects to something bad that happened to me in the past. Mm-hmm. But my coping mechanisms also determine how I do my job. So if I'm a policymaker, I will create policies based on the coping mechanisms. If I have learned that it's a really, really bad idea to trust people, I'm going to write policy that is going to presume that everyone is going to take advantage of the system. And everything needs to be done to get rid of all of those loopholes. Or I'm going to presume that because I'm in such high survival mode, and all my stress response is at high level constantly, anything that is not quite like me is a threat inherently. So if someone doesn't quite look like me, if they have different ideas from me, if they want different policies on me, all of that is not seen as different, but as dangerous. And so I need to protect myself, and I need to protect, in the work that I do, in the policies that I write, in the rules that I write, in the system that I create, I need to protect against these things.
And so that's how it gets ingrained. A moment ago, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there, but something said a moment ago about, because your experience has taught you that if I don't protect myself, I will get hurt again. And it can be as small and repetitive as I try to speak up when I'm 2 years old. I try to share my story when I'm 2 years old, but I get shut down. And then I try and share my story at 2.5 years old, and I get shut down, or I get talked over. And then I try at 3 years old and I get talked over again. That's trauma happening. You're learning that I can't ever speak up, or I'm going to get shut down. And if I get shut down, I may not get fed that day, or I may not be able to sleep in my bed. I get locked in the closet, or whatever it is.
It's even more core for a very small child. A small child is entirely dependent of the people they are that are supposed to care for them. Without them, they will die. Exactly. They will die if they don't get fed. So they don't even need to have the experience of not being fed. If something threatens the connection with the people who care for you, so if you get shut down when you talk, the child senses that this is a threat to the connection. It's not acceptable for me to talk. Because if I talk, then right now I'm being shouted at, but the next step may be that they walk out the door, and then no one will ever feed me ever again. Yeah. And that's the conclusion, not the conscious thought that the child has, but that is the conclusion that the brain survival part makes. And so in the
because a
brain, it
2-year-old
gets,
doesn't even have the words yet,
no,
to
no.
know any of that. They're not conscious and aware till at least 6 or 7 years old. So if that connection is broken in any way, then that's a threat to their survival.
But if a 1-year-old has that experience and the brain has encoded it in their brain and in their system as, if you speak up, you may die, which is literally how it gets encoded.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 45, someone says, no, you just need to learn to speak up. Just, go into the meeting and say something. You really, the sweat that breaks out, the panic that you feel is your brain telling you, you're about to die if you do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Comes
not at
right
a conscious
back.
level, but your entire system is responding to the message that it got and that it encoded that young.
Yeah. And God forbid, not just speaking up and talking like, I want juice, it could be your feelings that you're trying to express.
Mm-hmm.
And if those feelings are negative in any way, you better just bury that as soon as possible.
Yeah. And that's who you are. That the message then is that you cannot express who you are, which
right.
Again, at that age, for the brain, translates in you cannot be who you are.
Yeah. And that's devastating. And then and it's all happening when we don't even realize it, because it's happening at such a young age. 85% of our brain is developed in the first 6 years of life. So that's all getting encoded and we're not aware. And if we never process it, we think, oh, I just, I'm not a very feeling person, or I'm not a very emotional person, or I don't really cry, or, whatever it is, I'm an introvert, or whatever it is, I fear public speaking, again, more judgment, potential. That's how all these behaviors, all these personality traits, I think, not all of them, I'm generalizing, but so much of them really.
But I just want to, before we end on this depressing note on how everything goes wrong all the time, what I love and why I started Beyond the Trauma Wall is that there's huge hope in it, because it's, once people are actually aware of how this works, and once there is support, you can actually break down the trauma wall. If you're aware of the fact that you get so much pushback is because people are working from coping mechanisms, you can approach them in a way that is more effective, that doesn't trigger all those coping mechanisms. And as we were talking about earlier, yes, some people will need psychotherapy to resolve their own trauma, but not everyone. If you have communities that are enabled to support each other, to understand what it means to hold space for people and how valuable it is, and you allow people to find safety in their communities, whether it's with their neighbors or with their family or in school or with friends or with co-workers, if you have surroundings where there is that safety, it becomes possible to actually process and to become aware of the things that have been subconscious for so long. They will actually come up automatically if there is enough safety. And
they're coming up
need
automatically,
help,
right?
but you may not.
Oh, I'm sorry, I talked over you. Say
Go
that
ahead.
again.
You may still need professional help, but you may also not.
Okay. Yeah, and these things are coming up all the time anyway, because we're using all these coping mechanisms to deal with them. Mm-hmm. But if we deal with that, if we start to work through, and I'm guessing there's advice and guidance and so on in your book on how to work through this stuff. And if you've got a person or two or three who can hold space, then you can start to work through these things.
That's kind of the idea of, so the book that's coming out in August, The Trauma Root of Social Work Beyond the Trauma Wall, it's addressed at social workers, but 85% of it is directly applicable to anyone who works with people in any way. And the idea is it's not a how-to book. It's not an instruction book, but it explains the mechanisms, like I did a little bit just now, behind what stress does to us, how trauma kind of works, what the effects are, which makes a lot of things that seem baffling and unexpected very predictable, and
Not
helps
crazy
you.
and insane.
Exactly.
They make sense.
And it also explains, the circumstances that are needed and how those can be set up and how you can provide that, which you can then choose to start looking for or to start offering people. And I'm now working on the book after that, which is about, it's for a more general public, and it's about why and how the world around us is keeping us stressed at the moment, to kind of understand what is happening and why it's feeling this way.
Wow, why we're in this cycle. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Florence. We're gonna put some in the show notes, some more links, more than what we might normally include in the show notes, so that you can, find this information or get in touch with Florence, and because this is really powerful, and quite frankly, humanity really needs this understanding. So I think on that, we'll wrap up this episode of Question It. Thank you so much. And until next time, peace, love, and connect.
Thank you very much, Kevin. It was a great conversation.